Nothing unusual, we are back here. So I thought I'd start off this video with a quick little job. It's been on my jobs list for like 6 months, probably longer really. And the last trip that we done, the car was doing like a couple funny little things, in regards to boost pressure and things like that. So I just made up this little cap where the airbox goes with a tyre valve in it, so I could pressurise the whole intake system. And like you do, obviously, whichever intake valve's open, you're going to lose pressure through that cylinder into the crankcase and then vent out your rocket cover breathers, but that's fine. You don't want to block that off either, because then you'll pressurise your sump area and whatever, potentially push out your rear or front main seal or whatever else. But yeah, it's good enough. You can pressurise it up, and then I got a bit of soapy water, and Jesse was helping me find a few spots. So yeah, I had like some serious boost leaks. So a couple of the vacuum hoses underneath the intake manifold that fed, one fed the blow-off valve and one fed the fuel pressure reg. They both had pretty major leaks. Actually, the fuel pressure reg hose had a little tear in it. And yeah, because I don't monitor fuel pressure, which if I had any more inputs left on the computer, I would, but I've got none left. So yeah, I never really noticed that. The car was being a little bit funny fuel-wise on the last trip, but nothing too bad. So yeah, it was good to find that. I had a couple of leaks around the throttle body. And if you own one of these cars, this is worth checking, because on the throttle plate shaft, where it goes into the throttle body, it was leaking out of there. So, and it doesn't look like there's a replaceable seal or anything like that. So I'll see if I can get some light going. So between the last little throttle stopper, hopefully you can see that, there was like about a 3mm gap between that and the throttle body. So pulled the throttle assembly off and put a 8x2mm O-ring over the throttle shaft, the throttle plate shaft. And then over the top of that, I put a 3x12 and then put all the throttle linkage and that back on. And it seems to have sealed it up. So that was actually a pretty major leak. Like, it was just pissing out of there. So one thing to check, yeah, if you do have one of these throttle bodies, one of these cars, turboed or whatever, check that. But I did have a couple little leaks here and there. Throttle body gasket wasn't quite sealing, and yeah, a couple other small bits and pieces. But I thought, yeah, even if you don't, like, you got any turboed car, anything, it's not bad to do. Pressurize the intake system, and yeah, just be aware that you will lose pressure through your breathers. But so you'll never have a you'll never be able to put 10 psi on and hold 10 psi or whatever. So but yeah, good little trick. And yeah, with how bad these leaks are and how much better it is now when you pump it up, it should build boost a little bit earlier as well, which I had noticed it was sort of like a little bit lazy off the bottom. It was like full boost, 1900, 2 grand, but it started being like 2100, 2200. So I wouldn't be surprised, if that was the issue. So that's, yeah, good little trick. I also found on the idle control valve, where the elbow comes out, and the hose that feeds into before your throttle body, I found it leaking around there as well. So I just put a bit of Loctite around it and heated it up a little bit, so the Loctite would sort of go in there. Seems to have sealed that up. So it's surprising how many little spots are leaking actually. So one thing to keep in mind, if you're doing something like this, that's actually, I should have checked that. I should be consistently checking that every service or whatever. So, and onto the Dodgy Shock Mod. So if you had a keen eye and you sort of been around bypass shocks, you would have noticed that yeah, I've been using the same shock either side to mount, which means one side it doesn't work because it's the same shock. So like I mentioned in the other video, the bypass shocks do have a left and right, and that's in relation to where the bypass tubes and the res mount all come out of the body. So left and right, yeah, the the bypass tubes and the res hose tube is mirrored. So yeah, I started off mounting the left-hand side, and then when I mounted it and I was playing around with it, yeah, I straight up was like, nah, this shock's not going to work on this side. This shock is good for the right-hand side. So yeah, I was like, I'll get the other one out of the box and chuck it in, and pulled it out of the box, and it was the same. So that's no fault of Superior. That's probably, yeah, at the factory, Pro Fender factory or whatever, because they actually were labelled left and right on the part numbers and the stickers and that on the shocks, but they were exactly the same. So yeah, obviously there's been a mistake at the Pro Fender factory or whatever. So that's fine, these things happen. I have been talking to Superior, and Jesse is actually doing the same as what I'm doing. So he's putting bypass shocks in the front of his 80, and then he's putting Patrol 2.5 Superior shocks in the rear, like exactly what I'm doing. So if you're keen on doing 80 series in the future, there might be something going on with that, but I'll be sure to put it in the video. But yeah, so I have been talking to Superior, and they've been really helpful. And yeah, when Jesse gets his stuff sent down, because we're waiting on it now, they're going to send 2 of the opposite side down. So one of these will be Jesse's, and I'll get one that's coming in the post. And yeah, they will be valved the same, so it doesn't really matter, same length and everything. So that's not until the middle of April. So obviously I've got a trip coming up at Easter, which is the 1st of April. And I thought, what am I going to do? Because I've already cut all the shock mounts off. Yeah, I was in a bit of a pickle, but that's where this comes in. So this is a coilover, 10-inch coilover. It was in the race car, but then I put 12-inch in the front because I had 10s in the front, 12s in the rear. 10s were too short for that car in the front, the way I mounted it and whatever. So yeah, the 10s just got put in the box, and I bought some 12s for it. So this is what I'm going to be running in one side. So it's just a coilover. I'm obviously not going to put springs on it because, yeah, I've got springs. So it's just going to be acting as a shock. And because I've sent Superior my valving specs, I'm fairly confident that I do have the same shim stack here in a box for these. So I'm going to pull this apart, shim it up, put some fresh oil in it, whatever, check the seals and O-rings and that, make sure it's all good. And then, yeah, I've got to get some spacers made up because they're a 1/4 inch narrower in the mounting width, and these are 1/2 inch bolts, and the Pro Fenders are 16 mil. So I'm going to whip that down, and I'll show you what the inside of a shock looks like. And when you talk about valving and things like that, I'll show you exactly what it means. All shocks are pretty much the same. They just might have different piston design and things like that, but we'll get into that shortly. All right, so we're here playing with the shock. I thought I'd actually give you just a quick look at how they come apart. It's pretty easy. So number one, pull the valve out of that. That's where the nitrogen would be pressurized, but I already know this had no nitrogen in it. Obviously it was fully depressed. So yeah, that's fine. You need the valve out anyway. And yeah, this seal top here, which screws onto the seal head on the inside, that's just O-ring sealed. But I'll see if I can get this down. Yep. And that's all, this clip here, that's all that holds the whole shock from coming out. So that's why people run limit straps and things like that. Yeah, most shocks are all the same. They only have a little clip in there to stop the whole assembly coming out. So yeah, if you can imagine, without limit straps, with the shock always bashing in and out, I can't really pull that out, but bashing in and out, if you're jumping it and whatever all the time and the shock's always, you know, topping out, just keep in mind that's all that's holding the whole shock together. So once you get this little clip out, yeah, it's pretty much, the wear band fell off, but that's it. There's nothing else in there. So that's everything that you pull out. That's the seal head and the piston with the valving on it. And yeah, there's not much to them. And there's nothing in this shock because I've already, I had to change this. When the 12-inch coilovers came, they came with these fixed elbows, and these originally had swivel elbows on them, so I swapped them out. So yeah, I already know there's no oil and nitrogen in here, but I've never had this one apart. So yeah, just so you know, it would usually be full of oil. When you pull that out, oil till about here somewhere, and then yeah, all oil in here, into the piston in here, which sits about here, and then nitrogen in the rest of it here. I've gone through me shim stacks and valved it, similar to the bypass shock. That's the piston that's in it, but it will be different in the bypass shock, but it will be good enough for this trip. So I'm going to put it all back together. That's everything out of the shock. That's your piston in the res and your cap on the end. Everything's out, so clean it up, fresh oil, put it all back together and put some air in it to seat everything, and then I've got to get some nitrogen to put in it. All right, so I was editing this video and I thought that I didn't really explain enough when I watched it all back. So here's the other spare 10-inch coilover that I had. I've just whipped the cap off, and I pulled the little split ring out of there. Again, this has nothing in it, I already know it, but pull that out. And yeah, like I seen earlier, there's nothing in there. So yeah, like I explained, there is a piston in here. It's 8 inches from the end, and all that's filled with oil. Make sure there is no air in there. And then the rest of this is charged with nitrogen. Can be a varying range of pressures, but I run about 200 roughly, depending on the valving. But yeah, more pressure can help with faster rebound, a little bit firmer compression, things like that. But yeah, the main thing is the valving. So this little thing here is just little plastic, they're called wear bands. It's on the outside of the piston here, and on the outside of the piston in the res. That's because the piston in both, they slide up and down in there, and it's just, yeah, just that rubs on the inside of the shaft instead of wearing the edge of the piston out eventually. So that's all that does. And this here is a seal head that screws to this cap, which is all held in the end of the shock. And if you can see that, so this is fixed at the end of the shock, and then the shaft slides in and out of that. And what this does is this seal head here is, yeah, double O-ringed on the outside, and then they've got a seal on the inside of the in this steel bit here that wears up and down the shaft. So obviously it's just to seal all the oil into the shock so it doesn't bypass and squirt out everywhere. And that brings us to the piston. So that is a piston there. Every shock generally has a different design, or every brand I should say, and a different way of stacking the shims, but for the most part the principle is exactly the same. So as the shock's doing its compression stroke, it's actually the shims on the back that are in effect, and then as it's on its rebound stroke, the shims on this side are in effect. So these are just spacers, so don't worry about them on the end. But yeah, the shim stack's actually quite small. These have 6 shims, some shocks have more. There's different style of stacks, like a flutter stack, which is spacing like a few of the bigger shims down the bottom with smaller shims. There's a couple other little bits and pieces, but I won't get into that. And yeah, the bigger shims are your slow speed. So in this case, we've got 2 slow speed shims, and then the next 2 are medium speed, and then the top 2 are high speed. So yeah, if you're just cruising through a couple, yeah, where the shock's not really working that hard, it's just mainly works off the bottom shims. And then if you're hitting stuff hard, potholes, corrugations and that, it's generally the top shims. So these are shims here. Yeah, the varying ranges that I've got are from like 10 thou to 25 thou roughly. And yeah, generally, yeah, they just in a normal pyramid stack, so small to big, and yeah, varying sizes throughout. Yeah, you could talk for hours about valving shocks and things like that. I'm no professional at that. I just like to have a play around, so I won't get into too much detail with that. But yeah, you can, some people, instead of running two, or you can run one thick shim, or you can run two thinner shims, but the two thinner shims will act a bit softer than the one thick shim. And yeah, you can imagine if you had sort of one big shim at the bottom and then just one small shim, the amount of flex that that big shim has, you'll end up snapping the shim, which I've seen people do before. So yeah, there's lots to this. The basics of it are the same, but yeah, there's hours and hours and hours of things you could talk about this and how people do it. And yeah, obviously the heavier the valving, the harder the shock has to work to pass the oil through, which creates heat, which is a reason why they have the remote res, to dissipate heat and for more oil capacity. So yeah, you could talk about this stuff for hours, but for the most part, yeah, it's all basically the same. It's just got a top nut to hold it all on, and that's pretty much it. The shock design itself is fairly well simple to an extent, but yeah, it's crazy how much going from a stack of, say, 12 thou shims and then putting a stack of 20 thou shims in, it's like ridiculously different. So you wouldn't think something that small would create such a big impact in the shock. But anyway, that's what I found out. Yeah, a little bit more info for you, because yeah, when I re-watched the video, I didn't talk really anything about it. So a little bit of info for you, but that's pretty much the basics of it. So I've been doing a little bit of tinkering. Yeah, the shock's all back together, ready for nitrogen. Obviously, yeah, that's only temporary. So after Easter, when the other shock comes, I'll just be able to bolt that in. But hopefully that suits for now. But yeah, I have been tinkering with the rear bar. The bar's welded out. I just need to weld out these plates and then yeah, cut some plates for the back and finish capping these off. A few little bits and pieces. I want to try and get that done this week. So next weekend, I just paint and then finish the shocks off. So I'm looking forward to all that, because then the car's pretty much ready to go. Yeah, I did finish the sliders. They are buried in there. You can see they're all filled in, which yeah, is good, because that'll stop any damage to the sill happening. And yeah, I just got to finish the spare wheel holder off, like I said in a few episodes ago now, but I've got to cut the shovel mount off and move it because the gas strut's in the way. And yeah, the jerry can holder is together. It just needs welding out. So that's just what I've been tinkering away with at the moment. Yeah, like I said, the sliders are ready to paint. And then, yeah, I want to try and get this ready to paint, yeah, during the week. So get it all done. Literally, there's only next weekend is my last weekend before we go. And I've also got something happening on Saturday afternoon. So yeah, I'm running it tight on time. Like, this stuff's not that bad if I don't get it done. But yeah, I'd like to get it done, so then the job's done, because this has been going on for way too long. So after a lot of consideration, I've had to knock a few jobs on the head, because they're just not going to get done. So that's the rear bar, and anything associated with that is not going to get done, because yeah, there's just not enough time. So, and the weather's actually really good for driving, but really bad for painting. So I wouldn't be able to paint anything anyway. So Jesse's in here as well, and he's doing the same thing. So he's got a rear bar on the go, and he's got an airbox and a couple other things. But he's doing the same thing. So he's going to have to knock a couple jobs on the head, because we're going it's only like 7 days and we're leaving. Yeah, my car still looks like this. So, all right. So massive thanks to Gippsland CNC Cutting. I was a little bit pushy and they pulled through with the goods. So the res mount is here. I'll put that together. You'll see that in the next video. But what I'm going to do now is I've got a small rear barn door cut out and a rear door table as well, but we'll fit that up now. All right, so I'm currently installing the door table. It comes with everything that you need. Comes with all the riv nuts and yeah, the bolts and that, but you do need a riv nut gun if you are installing something like this. And I'm going to do the same to this panel here, be riv nutted. Oh, well, I've just finished, I've been tinkering with some other stuff, but I did finish bolting all this together. So yeah, it's all done. It's one thing I wanted is no rattles. So it's a good thing that, that these sides are actually like a steel tab with a bolt through it. So they don't rattle around like if you had chain or whatever, it would rattle against that. So nice sturdy construction, no complaints here. Yeah, tightens up nice on this. Doesn't rattle. So that's awesome. I've been wanting one of them for ages. So that'd be real handy at camp or whatever. And even the last few camping trips, I've sort of thought I wish I had one of them. But I went to put this on and then yeah, I got not enough riv nuts left, 6mm riv nuts in my kit. So I've got to get some more of them. But yeah, that's straightforward. You don't need to see me do that. So yeah, riv nuts and all them, same 6mm dome head screws. And where is it? Here. Yeah, so a couple small adjustments with the holes, but that's no big deal. That can get fixed. Well, I'll wrap the video up here because the only stuff I've got left now pretty much is the front shock mounts and anything associated with that. So I'll put that in the next video, finishing off all that. But other than that, the car's pretty much ready to go. I'll get the door card on there, and if I have time, I was going to do a service, but I'm waiting for gearbox oil because they didn't have a 20 litre where I'll buy it from. So I'm waiting for that. But anyway, that's something that I probably don't need to put on video because it's pretty simple. So yeah, check out the next video, which will be next week, finishing off these shock mounts. And also I've got to fix up the rear sway bar because I'll show you that in the next video, what happens to it. So tune in next week for that sort of stuff. Hope you enjoyed this video. Sort of, yeah, a little bit of car prep, nothing too interesting. And yeah, bit of a shorter one after last week's ridiculously long one. So hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you on the next one.